Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, it's another year, another time to make some more money, and I've got the course for you. Start the conversation, get the meeting will help your team, both business development, sales development, get into those new cold accounts, whether that function is under marketing or sales. I'll help you with that by starting organic, natural conversations, not pitching. Have people open up with you, build up a connection with them, understand your total addressable market, prioritize it, and put in a system that scales, that's predictable, that works the way you want it to work instead of the old school pitch. Believe me, I've sat through so many of these cold calling seminars, courses, books, and I've been doing it for 30 years, and it's evolved. And what I'm doing today is what's working in today's world. It works naturally, and people are just loving it, getting meetings, closing deals, and doing it without the rejection that is typically there in sales. So check it out at b2brevenue.com under the training tab. You can schedule a call with me. We can talk it over. I'll explain how it works and how we can work together on it. You can buy it per student, or I'll customize it for your particular product and team and coach you through that process. Also, if you're a sales leader and you want predictability, you want direction, momentum, and control with your deals, you can sign up for that course as well. Same type of model. A year-long access to it. It's content, community, and coaching, all included at b2brevenue.com. You can get my free ebook there on how companies make product selections. That's all free. Let's get into the interview, but I want to make sure you're checking out my partners. They're in the show notes. This week, it's Pipedrive and CoVideo. Pipedrive is the new CRM. It's been out for 5 years. I've been using it forever. I love that. It's connected up with your email, your calendar, and now they have team capabilities. CoVideo is the video email system. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's the way to break into new accounts. It's so much more engaging than text. Check them out. Also, make sure you're checking me out on LinkedIn, Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. Hey, Jessica, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Hey, Brian. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to be here. So just a little bit about myself. I'm the founder and co-owner of Interview Connections. We're the first and leading podcast booking agency. So I've been in the business of booking podcast interviews for almost 6 years now, which is crazy to think about. I live in Rhode Island and I'm married with 2 little kids.
Oh, boy. How'd you get interested in this?
So I did not wake up one day thinking I was going to start a business in podcasting. I kind of fell into it. When I was pregnant with my first child, I wanted to be home with him because I have a background in door-to-door work. I actually ran a door-to-door field canvas for a nonprofit organization. So I have 6 years of experience going door-to-door fundraising, which is kind of where my love for sales comes from. But as you can imagine, being pregnant and going door to door didn't really mix too well. So I decided to leave that job. And my dad, who's a business coach, told me about the world of online business and advised me to start a business as a virtual assistant. So I did that. He was my first client. And I did a variety of virtual assistant tasks, from social media marketing to client support, stuff like that. And my dad said one day, you know what, I like getting interviewed on podcasts. I think you'd be good at that. Why don't you start booking me on podcasts? And I was like, okay. So I just started doing that. And over the next few months, I was booking him on shows. I took on a couple other clients, booked them on shows. And that was back in 2013. And that was when podcasting really started to go up. And I was looking at some Edison research stats from 2018. And ever since 2013, podcast consumption has increased every single year. So it was really great timing to get into the business at that time, because shortly thereafter, I started Interview Connections, and we have just grown tremendously over the years, and more businesses are getting into podcasting.
That's it, because I got into it really early, like 2009. Mm-hmm. And that was too early. It was, people had MP3 players, but most people listened to it on their computer. Mm-hmm. And I did, 5-minute episodes. I didn't do any interviews. And then slowly, you're right, right around 2013 was when it got momentum. I think that's when smartphones kind of went mainstream.
Yes, exactly. And that's the other interesting stat is more people back when you first started podcasting were listening on their computer. And now every year, more and more people are listening on their smartphone on the road. Even just I listen to it at home, just on my podcast at home on my phone.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how people are consuming their content now too.
And that's weird because I was a huge TV guy, and now I'm kind of like a huge podcast guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
You throw the earbuds in and either go for a walk or do whatever because it's passive consumption.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what do you see as executives not getting about podcasting?
So what do I see executives not getting about podcasting?
Yeah.
So I mean, executives are really coming around to the idea. A lot of my calls that I have with people about podcasting is showing them how to leverage it to build their brand. And it's what I'll usually do is I'll be talking to the marketing person who's like, they need to be doing this. And then the executives are a little bit slower to get into it, because I think what executives are not getting is that even though podcast audiences are smaller than what you would get from mainstream media, television, radio, print media, even though the audiences are smaller with podcasting, the audiences are a lot more engaged and they're a lot more targeted. So you're not speaking to maybe 150,000 people, but every person in the audience is pretty a specific match for what you're talking about. So it's a much more targeted audience. Podcasting is also evergreen content. It's online for years for people to find down the road. And so I think that a lot of executives are starting to come around to it. But what I would say to the listeners here is just to remember that it's not size necessarily that really matters in podcasting. This is a high-end networking tool for you. The hosts are going to be people that you may do business with, that may refer business to you, and then the listeners as well.
And it's such low commitment.
Mm-hmm.
You compare it to like writing a blog post or an ebook, which is sometimes multiple days or weeks to do it, or contribute to an article. And it's not very evergreen. It kind of comes and goes. It might live on the internet forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I try and convince, because I talk to CMOs all day long, and they like, well, it's like a webinar. I go, no, because a webinar, you don't have any know, like, and trust yet.
Right.
A podcast, it's 100% opt-in.
Mm-hmm.
There's no push of the podcast into somebody's ears. They have to actually proactively hit play.
Right.
So they get to know the host or hosts or whoever produces it. And if they listen repeatedly, the trust is built there.
Yes. And I love that you talked about the know, like, and trust factor, because when you're a guest on a podcast, which is a great way to get into podcasting because you don't have to make the big investment to produce a show. You can start getting in front of listeners by being a guest. And when you're a guest on a podcast, the host is someone that the listeners already know, like, and trust because they're tuning into their voice, every day or every week. So by the host bringing you on, it's sort of a tacit endorsement. It's like the host is saying, what, I chose to bring this person to you. And so there is that added level of trust. It's like going to a party and having your friend introduce you to someone. You're going to trust that person more than if they just walked up to you on their own without an introduction.
Yeah. And people go, well, send me questions ahead of time. And it's like, it's all about you. I'm going to be talking about your favorite topic. It's nothing you have to prepare for.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I like to ask hosts, like, do you want me to send you questions? I emailed him like, do you want me to send you questions or no, or not? And that's always just a good tip. If you are going to go on a podcast, like, you want to make it easy for the host, but know that they're going to have their own questions and they're going to ask you questions out of their curiosity, which is going to make for a better interview, because a lot of executives who are new to the podcasting strategy will get nervous about, well, I need to know what they're going to ask me. And it's like, this isn't this isn't a magazine interview. Like this
Right.
isn't a set of questions that you're then going to respond. It's a conversation. And podcast hosts are not going to throw you a curveball. This isn't a gotcha strategy where they're going to try to throw you under the bus. It's just going on and having a conversation and then having hundreds or thousands of people listen.
And that's it. And the other thing I get from CMOs is, well, we were thinking of starting our own. And I'm like, well, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But what you want to do is leverage off of other people's audiences. It's going to take you years to build your own.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so great to leverage, both sides of the mic to have your own podcast and be a guest. But I always recommend starting by being a guest first, because you can get used to talking into a microphone too, which is a new experience for a lot of people who have not done any podcasting. So if you can be a guest for a while before you start your own show, your show won't be as bad because you'll already have practice being interviewed.
And look at the investment comparison in time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a half hour versus, you do your own. I've been doing my own.
A lot more than a half hour.
A lot more than a half hour. And the audience is pre-built, and the person who's hosting it probably knows how to promote it to their audience and lookalike audiences. And so that's already established. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine a more effective way to spend a half hour.
Absolutely. Businesses are rooted in relationships, which is another reason I think it's great for executives to start getting on podcasts, because when you've built a successful 7-8 figure company, as the CEO, as the COO, you're not necessarily on the ground level talking to leads and stuff like that. But by being on podcasts, you can really bring your face to the front of the company again.
And is it hard getting onto podcasts?
Well, I would love to give
Do you know anything about that?
I do know a little bit about that.
Okay.
So it can be, if you are doing it yourself, which is especially for executives, I would not advise doing this yourself. This is something that like our company does. But some of the things that you want to do in order to get on podcasts is first be really clear about your strategy and about what kinds of shows you want to be a guest on. So really understand your goals for podcast interviews. Is it to get leads? Is it to build your brand? Is it to connect with speaking opportunities? From there, you can figure out, who do I need to be talking to? What host do I want to be having conversations with to help me meet that goal? And then looking for podcasts that are hosted by those individuals that you want to be connecting with. Another thing that we do for a lot of our clients is we create a one sheet, which is just a beautiful one-page PDF. It matches your branding, and it just gives the host your bio, some suggested topics and questions, which they don't necessarily need to follow in the interview. But when you're pitching them, it gives them an idea of what you can talk about, makes for a quicker, easier yes if you attach that to your pitch. The hardest part about getting booked on podcasts, especially if you're doing this in-house, is finding the shows. There's hundreds upon thousands of podcasts out there, but identifying the right shows, the right contact info, writing a pitch that gets you through can definitely take a lot of time, which is why it's a great thing to outsource.
And I think everyone probably makes the same mistake. They go, I want to be on Rogan's podcast. And
yes.
Can I just call in on my ride into work that day? Will that work?
Yeah. So make sure you're in a quiet room with a microphone, and also be really be realistic about what kinds of podcasts are a good fit for you and what you want to get on. I've had people that say, like, here's my wish list, here's what I want to get on. And it's like Oprah, Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss. And that would be very exciting if you could be on those podcasts. But you might not be a good fit for those shows, nor would those shows be what you need. I've talked to people that have been on shows at that level, and they're like, listen, it was a huge ego boost, big credibility, definitely got a lot of traffic. But the smaller, more niche podcasts are where they get the actual business from, the actual people who come through and become a client. So just kind of understand what kinds of shows you want to be on and why, because I think podcasting is a strategy for fortune, not fame. If you want to be famous, there's other ways to do it. Podcasting is really to make real relationships with potential clients and business partnerships and referral partners.
And I think that's a great distinction, because when I talk to CMOs about sponsoring the podcast or partnering, They go, oh, we're working with Adam Carolla. And it's like, well, he doesn't have the audience you want.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's
You
like
want to go for the right target audience.
he has more people, but I'm not sure he's the right, unless you want truck drivers using your product. It's just different.
Yeah, and that's a great point because for the CMOs listening, if you are advertising on podcasts, especially if you have a service-based business, I highly recommend leveraging the strategy to guest. It is so much cheaper, and you'll get a great return on your investment.
And that's it, and it's not an ad.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a conversation. And that's another good thing to mention is that you don't want to go into podcast interviews thinking you're going to pitch your business and your product or your service. You have to go into this strategy really wanting to give value and just give as much information as you can to the listeners. I would never say like, oh, well, I'll tell you a little bit about this, but the rest you got to pay me for. Like, that's really not the best mindset to have. You want to give as much valuable information as you can in the time that you have on that podcast, because if you do, listeners are going to want to come to you for more.
And have you found that people, take a while to get used to it?
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely a warm-up period with podcasting, for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, it takes a little bit of time to get used to just being interviewed on podcasts and being a guest. And again, like that, speaking into the microphone, I forget because, I mean, as you too, like we've been podcasting for a long time that it's fine for me to plug into a microphone and talk like into a podcast. But for people that haven't done it before, it can be a new experience. So there's just getting warmed up with that side of things. But it also takes time to get used to because it's not an overnight strategy. Like doing podcast interviews, it takes a little while to see a return and to even see some results. So, I always recommend people go into it and just say like commit to it for at least 6 months. Because if you go into it and say, I'm going to do 4 interviews on podcasts and then see what happens. I mean, number one, it's going to take a couple months for the shows to even go live because you'll record and then the host is going to have that probably in Dropbox for a few weeks, a couple months, because hosts are always recording and then releasing it on their schedule. So it will take time. My clients that are with me for 4.5, 5 months, at the end of their time getting interviewed, they're usually just starting to see the interviews go live. So it really does take a while for the results to happen. So you've got to commit to it long term.
And I think that's a good thing is to trickle it out because too often I get bombarded with authors and I've learned to ask, okay, whose show have you already recorded? Mm-hmm. And of course they want everyone to release it the day of the book. And it's like,
oh my gosh.
I go, if somebody listens to you on someone else's show, they're not going to listen to you on my show because they just heard you.
Yeah, I actually just wrote an article about that on LinkedIn about timing your podcast tour for your book launch, because that is something that I get all the time. In fact, it's so funny because yesterday I had a call with somebody and they're like, okay, we need to get interviewed on podcast. Our product is launching in 2 weeks. And I said, wait a second. So we're talking right now and you want interviews to be live in 2 weeks? I'm like, are you crazy? Like, that's not going to happen. So you definitely, if you do want podcast interviews to be going live around the time that your product launches, then you've got to plan ahead because it just takes time for shows to get booked, recorded, maybe they get rescheduled. Like, you need to give yourself some time and just know that it's ongoing. They don't all have to be going live at the same time. They're going to benefit you even if they go live over the course of, a few months.
And the other thing, certainly as a host, that is kind of annoying is that the guests rarely, if ever, promote even their own episode, never mind the show in general.
I know. Promote your episodes. This is such a huge thing. This is so big. If you are going to be a guest on a podcast, you need to be promoting your appearances, because to really see the results of podcasting and to get a return on your investment, you need to do everything in your power to help make that happen. So one mistake a lot of people make is they go on podcasts and they do the interview and they sit back and wait for all the results to happen. But it takes work on your side too. The host is going to produce it. They're going to promote it to their audience, but you as the guest should be sharing it with your audience whenever, I'm a podcaster too. And when my guests promote the episode, I always get more downloads on that episode, regardless of whether the guest is a big name or if they have a big following or not. So that is super important. I'm glad that you brought that up.
And I tell people, and they'll say, "Oh, well, I'll promote just my episode when it comes out." And it's like, well, and also what's annoying, because you're kind of in this category, but not really, where the PR people will contact me, and they're getting paid, right? But they're not. The guests aren't paying me to be on the show, and they just hound you. When's it coming out? When's it coming out?
Yeah, it's funny. I would love to just comment on that, because we are a booking agency, but this is a mistake a lot of PR agencies make, which is why if you are going to outsource this, I would be really careful about choosing a traditional PR agency to pitch you, because they don't really know how to navigate the world of pitching podcasters. It's different than pitching media outlets. So when we pitch clients, we connect the client with the host, and we tell them we have no control over when this is going live. So just know that that's something we're always talking about, because it is super annoying. Like, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? If I'm a guest, I'll say, do you know when this will be live? Whatever the answer is, I'm cool. I just want to know so I can prepare to promote it.
And here's a little secret. If you promote it before it comes out, it might come out sooner.
I know, right? I know. I like to share that I'm going to be recording a podcast. Like, I just share it. I'm like, so excited to be interviewed by Brian today. Just start getting the buzz out there, because people that are following you on social media, maybe they're prospective clients, them just seeing that you're getting booked on podcasts, even if they're not going to listen, is going to raise your credibility, and it's going to make you occur to them as a more in-demand expert.
It does. And when other podcasters see people share, they're like, cool, this person gets it.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. So many, I'd say 1% get it. And no matter how many times, because I get hit up by the admins because the guests are too proud to talk to you. So they go, hey, when's that episode coming? I go, it comes in this order: partners, promoters, and then everybody else. And you're in the everybody else category right now. If you'd like to move up, you can promote the show. And they go, oh, we'd be happy to promote the episode. And it's like, I'm sure you would. Right? Yeah,
leave a rating and review. I mean, this is something you should be doing as a guest, is listening to the podcast beforehand number one, just to make sure you're a good fit. Listen to it before you record to make sure you understand that host style and you can be a good guest. And then, since you've already listened to it, go leave a rating and review. That helps the podcaster get seen by more people. So there's all these things that I recommend you do as a guest to increase your chance of getting more people finding you, and to have a better relationship with the host, because they're making a big investment in producing an episode with you and for you. So the least you can do is promote their show, rate it and review it, and just do what you can to help them in, producing their show.
And I can't agree with you more about the PR thing. I'm not sure why that is so bad. I can honestly tell you, in the 9 years I've had, maybe one or two PR agencies even be what I would consider professional. Even when I approach the author, the person, the guest, and they pass it to the PR person, and only one case was it a positive experience. I've had people, they put something on my calendar, and then the guest doesn't show up, and they're like, can we move it an hour? And it's like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, that's really important. You have to really honor your schedule with podcasters, and just, pick a time, stick to it. Don't be moving it around a lot. Yeah. That's really important. And it's like, this is not a PR agency's specialty. This is such a new form of media. And even if podcasting has been around, I think it's like almost 12 years now, podcasting is so new for PR agencies, because it's only recently that PR agencies have clients saying, hey, I want to be booked on podcasts. Can you get me booked on podcasts? So there's some top PR agencies in New York that actually use interview connections to get their clients booked on podcasts, because they know they don't have the connections. They know they don't get the podcasting world, so they just outsource it to us. So it's a different world, podcasting.
That's it. And a lot of people hire a VA who's not experienced and just say, get me on as many shows as you can.
Yeah.
And you're wasting the host's time because, I get at least 10 requests a day and maybe one is somewhat relevant, but it makes me read the other 8 where they just don't fit the audience at all. And then you get stuck in their cadence, right? Where it's like, hey, following up on the thing that you didn't respond to.
Exactly. It's important if you use a VA to make, and I don't think you should really, unless they've got experience in pitching, because a lot of VAs are sending out templated pitches. In fact, so my podcast, it's called Rock the Podcast, but it used to be called Roads to Success. I rebranded a couple years ago, and I got a pitch recently. I'd like to be on your show, Roads to Success. And I was like, no, I'm not sure where you got your information from because I changed the name 2 years ago. So stuff like that will just get you disqualified. So you don't want to price shop if you're going to have somebody do this for you.
And how do you go about picking the shows that are a match?
Yeah, so I'll tell you how I do it because I leverage my own strategy by getting interviewed on podcasts. For me, I really want to connect with podcasters that are also successful business owners and entrepreneurs. A lot of podcasters, and there's nothing wrong with this, but a lot of podcasters, there's marketing podcasts where the hosts like have a day job, but they're starting a podcast about business and marketing because they are aspiring to be a full-time entrepreneur. And that's not as valuable of a connection. If the host is like recording at 8 p.m., you're like, do you have a day job? Because this might not be a good networking opportunity for me. So I am looking for shows that are hosted by the kinds of entrepreneurs that I want to connect with. And that's what I would advise to the executives listening is look at who the host is. If they don't have a huge audience, it doesn't always matter, because if you're going to have a good connection with that host, if they've got an established business and there's opportunities there, that's, one of the most important factors. Beyond that, it's looking at their online presence. Have they taken the time to get some good artwork made? They have a good website. What do their ratings and reviews look like? How many episodes have they published? Are they putting episodes out on a consistent basis? Because if they're publishing like one episode every 2 months, then there's a chance that if they record with you, your episode might not see the light of day because they don't have a great track record in publishing them. So you want to look at a lot of those factors.
Cool. Hey, this has been a lot of fun. Any other advice you have for like senior level executives about, finding the right shows, getting on, putting together a strategy?
Yeah. So my final advice would just be to, go on a couple shows a month and really commit to giving value to the listeners, and to kind of get out of the mindset of direct marketing where you want to see immediate return on investment and increased traffic. Like, know that this is a relationship building tool. And if you want more information about how to do this, or if you want to check out our services, you can go to interviewconnections.com.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. Hey, make sure you check us out on LinkedIn, and B2B Revenue is the website. You get the free ebook there. You can learn about the courses. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Brian Burns Sales Podcast on YouTube, where I store both these podcasts, my videos that I do daily on sales and marketing tips, all the webinars are hosted there. So if you ever get lost and you don't know where to go, Brian Burns Sales Podcast on YouTube is a great place to be. And you can sign up to get on my calendar at B2B Revenue under training, and we can talk over your sales and marketing situations about getting you into your dream accounts in a fast, natural, organic way. And if you happen to see my content fly by on LinkedIn, I'd really appreciate a like or comment or a share, and we'll see you next time.